Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 186. Chapter 186. At that moment, Count Raspatchin, with his protruding chin and alert eyes, wearing the uniform of a general with sash over his shoulder, entered the room, stepping briskly to the front of the crowd of the gentry. "Our sovereign the Emperor will be here in a moment," said Raspatchin. "I am straight from the palace. Seeing the position we are in, I think there is little need for discussion. The Emperor has deigned to summon us and the merchants. Millions will pour forth from there." He pointed to the merchants' hall. "But our business is to supply men and not spare ourselves. That is the least we can do." A conference took place confined to the magnate sitting at the table. The whole consultation passed more than quietly. After all the preceding noise, the sound of their old voices saying one after another, "I agree," or, for variety, "I too am of that opinion," and so on, had even a mournful effect. The secretary was told to write down the resolution of the Moscow nobility and gentry that they would furnish 10 men, fully equipped, out of every 1,000 serfs, as the Smolensk gentry had done. Their chairs made a scraping sound as the gentlemen who had conferred rose with apparent relief, and began walking up and down, arm in arm, to stretch their legs and converse in couples. "The Emperor! The Emperor!" A sudden cry resounded through the halls, and the whole throng hurried to the entrance. The Emperor entered the hall through a broad path between two lines of nobles. Every face expressed respectful, awestruck curiosity. Pierre stood rather far off and could not at all hear what the Emperor said. From what he did hear, he understood that the Emperor spoke of the danger threatening the empire, and of the hopes he placed on the Moscow nobility. He was answered by a voice which just informed him of the resolution just arrived at. "Gentlemen," said the Emperor with a quivering voice. There was a rustling among the crowd, and it again subsided, so that Pierre distinctly heard the pleasantly human voice of the Emperor, saying with emotion, "I never doubted the devotion of the Russian nobles, but today it surpassed my expectations. I thank you in the name of the fatherland. Gentlemen, let us act. Time is most precious." The Emperor ceased speaking. The crowd began pressing around him, and rapturous exclamations were heard from all sides. "Yes, most precious, a royal word," said Count Rostov with a sob. He stood at the back, and though he had hardly heard anything, understood everything in his own way. From the hall of the nobility, the Emperor went to that of the merchants. There he remained about 10 minutes. Pierre was among those who saw him come out from the merchants' hall with tears of emotion in his eyes. As became known later, he had scarcely begun to address the merchants before tears gushed from his eyes, and he concluded in a trembling voice. When Pierre saw the Emperor, he was coming out accompanied by 2 merchants, one of whom Pierre knew. The other was the mayor, a man with a thin, sallow face and a narrow beard. Both were weeping. Tears filled the thin man's eyes, and the fat man sobbed outright like a child and kept repeating, "Our lives and property, take them, your majesty." Pierre's one feeling at that moment was a desire to show that he was ready to go to all lengths and was prepared to sacrifice everything. He now felt ashamed of his speech with its constitutional tendency, and sought an opportunity of effacing it. Having heard that Count Marmanov was furnishing a regiment, Bazukov at once informed Raspatchin that he would give 1,000 men and their maintenance. Old Rostov could not tell his wife of what had passed without tears, and at once consented to Petya's request, and went himself to enter his name. Next day, the emperor left Moscow. The assembled nobles all took off their uniforms and settled down again in their homes and clubs, and not without some groans, gave orders to their stewards about the enrollment, feeling amazed themselves at what they had done. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 186 of War and Peace. I hope you liked it. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 186. True Freedom in the Sleekest Slavery of All. Yesterday we learned that with war comes conscription, and that those conscripted are most likely to be Russia's serfs. Today this is confirmed as the emperor's visit to the Sloboda Palace draws not only a bevy of patriotic tears from the noble and merchant classes, but also a commitment of thousands of their serfs to the war cause. Contemporary readers, we noted, may very well be put off by chapters like this, where the lives of the serfs are so coercively drafted to the whims and wishes of the ruling class. Those sympathies are justified. The deprivation of liberty is a wretched condition. Epictetus, longtime friend of A Year of War and Peace, and a slave himself, would argue, however, that it's not just the serfs who are unfree. The nobles and merchants are unfree too. In the first chapter of the fourth book of his Discourses, Epictetus imagines a dialogue with a Roman council. In this dialogue, the two discuss the elements of freedom. The council argues that he is a free man because he comes from an entire lineage of free men. Epictetus, building up a radical notion of freedom, argues that the council too is a slave. First, Epictetus and the council agree that the free man is the man who lives as he wishes, who is proof against compulsion and hindrance and violence, whose impulses are untrammeled, who gets what he wills to get and avoids what he wills to avoid. The slave, conversely, is the man who acts against his own will, under compulsion and with groaning. The council initially argues that he then lives a life as a free man. He is, after all, a council, res ipsa loquitur. Not so fast, says Epictetus. What about Caesar? Is the council not beholden to him? Must the council, if Caesar so desires, act against his own will, under compulsion and with groaning? All of a sudden, the council isn't so quick to assert his freedom. Epictetus uses this opening to illustrate the myriad other ways in which most men are slaves. There is not only our subordinance to our social and political superiors, there is also our obedience to material conditions and circumstances. Man often finds himself in bondage to his fear of death, his fear of loss of property, and the fear of bodily harm. The person who can deprive a man of these things, Epictetus argues, is the true master of man. Perhaps the nobles and merchants in today's chapter are not as free as they'd like to think they are. They are beholden to Emperor Alexander, yes, but also to Napoleon, whose invasion threatens to deprive them of their wealth and land. In response, in an effort to preserve their wealth and land, the nobles are compelled to act under compulsion and groaning. Just look at Pierre. Yesterday he argued for a calm catalogue of Russia's position before committing resources to the war effort. Today, swept up by the mania induced by the emperor's visit, he immediately pledges 1,000 men and their maintenance. Count Rostov also acts against his will. He returns home and gives his son Petya permission to join the army. This is something he was previously against. These rich men, these nobles, yoked to their positions and possessions, are beholden to what Epictetus calls the sleekest slavery of all. Fortunately, according to Epictetus, there is a way to free ourselves from our bondage. The first step is to divest ourselves of our attachment to the things that bind us. Daily Meditation. This study you ought to practice from morning to evening, beginning with the smallest things and those most liable to damage, with an earthen pot, with a cup. Then proceed in this way to a tunic, to a little dog, to a horse, to a small estate and land. Then to yourself, to your body, to the parts of your body, to your children, to your wife, to your brothers. Look all around, and throw these things from you which are not yours. Purge your opinions, so that nothing cleave to you of the things which are not your own, that nothing grow to you, that nothing give you pain when it is torn from you. And say, while you are daily exercising yourself as you do there in the school, not that you are philosophizing, for this is an arrogant, offensive expression, but that you are presenting an asserter of freedom. For this is really freedom. Epictetus, The Discourses. All right, so that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 186 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we will be reading and reflecting on chapter 187. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.